the sound from the cupboard. This happened 2 years ago when I was in my final year of high school. My family had gone out of town for a relative's wedding, but I stayed home to study for exams. The house was old, about 30 years old, and I'd lived there my whole life. But that weekend, the silence in the house felt different. There was a heavy, suffocating atmosphere in the air. Around 1 a.m., while I was studying, I was startled by a faint noise coming from the kitchen. At first, I ignored it, thought it was just the wind. But a few minutes later, it came again. Tap, tap. It was coming from the small overhead cupboard next to the refrigerator. That cupboard was way up high, barely ever opened. We usually kept old cleaning supplies there. I grabbed a flashlight and used a chair to open the cupboard. It was covered in dust, but there was something strange inside. On the inner side of the cupboard door, something was scratched in, like with a fingernail. I heard you come. Just then, I heard a whispering voice behind me. You can't leave now. It was so clear. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The power went out instantly. The entire house was plunged into total darkness. The next morning, I left the house without telling my family anything and wandered around outside until they came back. I only returned once they were home. I tried to forget about it, but I couldn't. And a few weeks later, I learned something about the house's past. I was talking to an elderly neighbor and the topic came up by chance. Back in the 90s, a family had lived in our house. They had a 10-year-old daughter who was hearing impaired. One day, the girl suddenly vanished. She was searched for everywhere but never found. The police suspected a kidnapping, but there were no clues. It was said that the last place she had been seen was near that small cupboard in the kitchen. No one could figure out the significance of the cupboard, but after the girl went missing, her mother had a mental breakdown. One night, she was taken to the hospital, screaming through the house. She can't hear me, but I can hear her. She's still making noise in the kitchen. That family moved out shortly after, and the house was sold to us. Since that day, I've never opened that cupboard again. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is dead silent, I still hear the tapping. Tap, tap, as if someone is still inside. The man behind the door. This happened last winter. After the pandemic, I decided to leave my family home and live on my own. It was a small but cozy apartment. I loved the silence. That was until the first note I found in front of my door changed my life. A white, folded piece of paper. It had only one sentence written on it. If someone knocks 3 times on your door, don't open it. There was no name, no date, but it felt as if it had been written directly to me. That same night, around 2 a.m., knock, knock, knock. 3 clear, deliberate knocks on the door. I looked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. At that moment, I was just scared, but the real nightmare was only beginning. The second night, again 3 knocks. Then, a note was pushed under the door. Are you curious how I look from the inside? The edges of the paper were damp. It seemed like it had been buried in the ground and dug up. The third night, a knock came, followed by a whisper. It's your turn. Despite being alone in the apartment, I noticed fingerprints on the inside of the door, inside the house. I called the police. They came, inspected the apartment, but there were no signs, no forced entry, no camera footage. But when I spoke to an elderly neighbor, things got even more complicated. That door, it used to be knocked on by someone else for people living alone like you, she said. According to the neighbor, many years ago, a young man living in the building had talked about the 3 knocks on his door. After opening it, he disappeared. No one ever saw him again. All that remained was one thing: 3 fingerprints on the inside wall and a note. Now you're with us. No one knows exactly what this thing is. But there's one thing the neighbor said that still haunts me. If 3 knocks come to your door and you don't open it, you'll be safe. But if you open it, you'll disappear because it knows your voice now. I never opened that door, but the sound still comes. Sometimes, just as I'm about to fall asleep. Knock, knock, knock. Right now, I'm seeing a psychiatrist. He says the sounds I hear are trauma-related. I'm taking sleeping pills. But the interesting thing is, at the end of my last session, the doctor told me this. You know, this week, someone else came. They say they experienced the same thing. They heard the same sound, found the same note. That's when something snapped inside me. Because now I know. This thing doesn't stop with just one person. It reaches everyone who knows the story. And now you know it too. One night, if it knocks 3 times on your door, what will you do? Shadows surrounding the lonely night. One morning, while packing my things, I found an old box. Inside the box were the keys to my old house, which had been lost for years. I was very young back then, and as I remember, I was never truly alone in that house. But now, years later, everything was different. I lived alone in a new apartment. That box took me back to the past. For a moment, I realized that I felt a strange urge to return to my old house. I never understood that the shadows of my past were following me. That day, I set off early in the morning to visit my old house. I can't explain why, but I couldn't shake the urge to go. When I arrived at the house, it seemed unchanged from the outside. But when I opened the door, I immediately felt that everything inside was freezing cold. The house felt like an empty shell. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, but something was missing. There was no sign of life inside, no furniture, no trace. It was as if I had never lived there. I slowly stepped into the living room. At that moment, I heard a faint tapping sound from inside. The sound was coming from behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing. The temperature in the air was strange. Despite the cold, it felt like there was no warmth at all. Suddenly, a shadow moved. That old corner. That corner always scared me. When I was a child, I used to say I saw ghosts here. But as I grew up, the dark shadow of that corner never left me. Now, the shadow was there again. And this time, early in the morning, the shadow was watching me. I slowly moved forward, but something stopped me. On the floor, in the corner, was a note. Just like the one I had found in my old house, it had something written on it. Are you looking for what you're afraid of? At that moment, my heart started racing. When I entered, I had closed the door, but now it was open. I started texting a friend, but when I found the note, my phone suddenly went black. The lights went out. In that moment, when the fear truly began, I felt like I couldn't even take a step. Because at that moment, I noticed the eyes of the shadow. I slowly turned around. The eyes were very close to me, but something was strange. Those eyes didn't belong to anyone. The shadow took one more step. In that instant, a voice echoed in my mind. You don't need to run, it will find you. And indeed, it found me. But the most terrifying thing was this. The shadow was just an echo of what the past had done to me. At that moment, I realized, in the past, someone else had lived in this house in my place. A being that only carried the memories of that person was waiting for me every night, and now it was waiting for me. At that moment, the door did knock again, but behind the shadow, there were a pair of bloody shoe prints, and they had gone very deep.